Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Greystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Greystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongreystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Hope you've had a good day so far. It's actually 4 a.m. In my hotel room in Las Vegas here. I flew over here yesterday and I had 23 hours without sleep. Went to sleep at about 6 and then got up at about midnight. Just woke up naturally and now I couldn't sleep, so I've been kind of doing the bits of work and I decided to record a podcast. And if you're listening to this for the first time, welcome. This is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And it's about being always free. It's about designing your life to be who you want to be, to get to a level of financial independence that allows you to live your most inspired life. And obviously that doesn't mean stop working and all that stuff. It means being independent and just focusing on what you want to do every day, so you're inspired, and then you can create more wealth, more income, and all the rest of it. So, great place to be. If you haven't listened to all the other episodes, I highly recommend you go back to number 1 and start there. But since last week we had a very special episode with one of my mentors, John DeMartini, and I attended his breakthrough experience the weekend before, and then I got to spend some time with him, and then he came onto the podcast. It's an absolute banger, that one. Go and listen. It's been one of the most popular episodes. And since that episode, really the episode was about the importance of your highest values and how that can help you build wealth. And since then I've had lots and lots of questions, very, very common questions about how do I really determine my highest values, and what if wealth building is, I want it to be my highest value, but I kind of need a bit of more motivation. So in this episode, I thought I'd do a bit of a follow-on really and go through some tools and some systems and some strategies that you can use so that after this podcast you can actually go and do this. You can figure out what it is that's highest on your values, and also how to kind of link it. If wealth building isn't on your highest values, you can kind of link it to your highest values to up it a notch on your value list, so to really shift your values. So I'm going to be doing that, and it really it came at good timing as well, because this week we kind of put out some more information via email about the Tears of Freedom program that I'm launching at the end of October. And there was we had 680 applications for this thing, and we're only taking in 30 people. So we put out this email and kind of said, listen, we're only taking on 30 people. Would you consider retracting your application, because it will make our job easier of filtering down the 30, and we'll give it to people who really, really want it. And the amount of responses we got, like hundreds of people were like, no, I definitely want in. And it made me think, because I was looking at the email stats and all the rest of it, it made me kind of think about when values get shifted out of your control and how that makes you take action. And people were kind of rushing to say, yeah, I definitely want to be part of this. But it made me think about the entire email list as a whole, because I've got about 5,000 people on the email list, okay? And I've got about 34, the email goes out every Sunday, maximum value, it's about 4,000 to 5,000 words, which some people might say is too long, some people might say is too short, I don't know. But it's maximum value, and we've got about a 34% average click rate. So 34% of people open the thing, which is quite high. And out of that 34%, which is 1,700 people on 5,000, let's just say it's 5,000, due to my, according to my 90-10 philosophy that 10% of people only take action, if we were to say, okay, well, 1,700 people open the email, how many people read till the end? Well, probably 10%. So that's 170. Well, okay, 170 people read the whole email. How many people actually take the action steps at the end? Well, that's 17. So out of 5,000 people, 17 people are actually taking action. That's it. That's probably being generous. That's probably being optimistic. It's probably more like 10 out of the 5,000. And when you put it like that, you start to see that this kind of inertia that people have, and the lack of, not lack of motivation, but the lack of urgency to take action. So it made me think, because motivation's always there. If I was to say to you, you've got to earn £100,000 or $100,000 in the next 30 days, could you do it? You'd probably go, oh yeah, I'll give it a go. You come up with some ideas. You probably wouldn't be that committed to it, and you'd probably fail. Whereas if I said, listen, I'm going to kidnap your entire family and you're never going to see them again unless you bring me $100,000 in the next 30 days, you would find the motivation, because the value just got shifted. Something that wasn't on highest on your values got shifted right to the top and made you want to go and take action. It made you want to go and do that. And the motivation was always there. You're still able to do it. You see it as well when people are kind of unhealthy. When people are smoking and drinking, and then they keep getting told, yeah, your arteries are going to clog up. You're going to become unfit soon. Just think about your grandkids. You're not going to be able to see them when they grow up, and all this kind of stuff. If you get a heart disease or a heart attack, and they're like, yeah, and then they have a heart attack, right? They survive the heart attack, or they're told that if they don't change their ways, they're going to die very soon by a doctor. All of a sudden, they change their habits. So the motivation's there. They can do it. It's just not high enough on the values. And our values are really dictated by the voids that we have, or we perceive to have. So whatever you lack or you perceive to lack most, wherever the biggest void is at any time in your life, will be what the opposite of that will be what you value most. So if you've got big health problems, and that's a massive void, you will shift health to the top of your priorities. If you've got a massive, a debt, or you've got a big money problem, you will shift money to the top of your priority. You'll try and get as much money. And and that's how it works. But on top of that, okay, so there's lack of motivation because of values, but on top of that, we automatically and naturally become complacent as humans. We stagnate. We just want to rest. We plateau because of this inertia that we've got built in. Just to put this into perspective, if you said to a child, listen, you've got £9, I'll give you £1 more, or $1 more, and you've got $9, they'll say, oh, great, that's really good, because that $1 makes up 10% of their entire net worth. If they've now got $10, the $1 you gave them is 10% of their total net worth. Whereas if the kid then accumulated $100, the $1 becomes a little bit less more important. You say, oh, I'll give you $1, and they're like, okay, well, it's now 1% of my net worth, so it's not as important. And if they get $1,000 or $100,000, and then you say, listen, I'll give you $1 if you come and clean my, patio, or come and work for me and do this job, I'll give you $1. They'll probably say, it's not really worth my time. So you naturally kind of have lower value on money as you grow more, but then you plateau. And you plateau, and the rate and the degree that you plateau is relative to what you're earning. So with all that going against us, it's no wonder that there's such a small success rate. So what I wanted to do in this podcast, it might be a bit of a longer one, but I want to really go through and answer some of your questions on how you can determine your highest values, and also if wealth building isn't, or something isn't, and you want it to be because you really do know that it's important, it's becoming more and more important, I'm going to give you a process on how you can actually shift it up a gear and force it to the top. So really it just carries on from last week's episode, and it's a series of questions that I'm going to ask you, and I want you to really think carefully about how you answer them, and maybe listen back to this podcast, because you're probably, listening to this on the fly in the gym. Maybe you're taking a walk, or you're on the commute to work or whatever. But I want you to go and I want you to think about this, but then maybe listen again and take the time to write the answers to these questions out. So it's a series of questions, and the first one is, how do you fill your space? Okay, what's around you? What's in your space? Is it your phone? What are the top 3 things in your space? Write down everything that you fill your space with most and pick the top 3 things. If you go into my office, you will see a lot of books, okay, because I love learning. You will see a lot of technology, so I love kind of technology, advanced technology, gadgets, and I like to use innovative products to in my business and in my life. So you'll see that. But write down the how you fill your space. What's always in your space, okay? And that will give you a clue. Start building clues as to what what you like to have around you in terms of material things. The next question is, how do you fill and spend your time? So you tend to make time for things that are important to you. You've probably noticed that, you've always made time for things that are important. If a really cool party comes up and you want to go to it, you get that FOMO, you make it happen and you go to it. And if, something that isn't quite as interesting to you, you don't make it happen, even though it's important. It could be important, but you just don't make time for it. So how do you fill and spend your time? Write down the 3 things, or the 3 areas that you spend most of your time in. It might be the gym, it might be with your family, it might be with in your business, it might be wealth building, it might be social. The next one is, how do you spend your energy? So that's almost similar to time, but not quite. What do you focus your energy on most? What do you put all of your effort and your energy into? The next question is, how do you spend your money? And this is an easy one. You can just literally log on to your bank and look at common transactions. You know what you spend your money on, and the top 3 things are going to spring to mind. And believe it or not, when you actually pay the bills and you write checks, if you're doing that as a manual process, you will write them checks or pay them bills in order of priority without even knowing it. And have you ever noticed that you always have the money for things that are important to you, but you can't find money to things to save, for instance? You keep saying, I never find the chance to save because I never quite got enough to start saving, but you'll buy something that's really important to you, high on your values, or you perceive to be important to you. So write down how you spend your money, and the top 3 things are really what we're after. Next question is, what do you think about most? What occupies the space in your mind? What occupies your mind the most? What do you think about? What do you wake up thinking about? What do you dream about? What do you think about in the shower, when you're taking a walk, when you're in the gym? What occupies your mind the most? Write down the top 3 things. The next question is, what are you visualizing and dreaming about the most? So it's slightly different to thinking about most. This is what you're visualizing to happen in your life. What are you going for in your mind? What are you talking to yourself about? What your dreams are, what your aspirations are, what your life looks like in the future? What are you visualizing the most? And it will be there. Trust me. You might say, "Oh yeah, I don't really do that," but it will be there. You'll have this image in your mind. If you just close your eyes and think about what you're thinking about in the future, what you're aiming for, and what you're visualizing, you'll have 3 things that you can write down. Once you've done that, the next question is, what are you affirming in your mind? Okay, what conversations are you having in your mind? What are you telling yourself? Are you saying things like, "Oh, look, I've got imposter syndrome. I'm not as skilled as some of the other people. Maybe I should give this up"? Are you telling yourself, "Actually, I'm an absolute boss at this. I can't wait to, share this with the world, this message that I've got in my brain"? Are you telling yourself you're the absolute best at what you do? So write down 3 things of what you're affirming in your mind about yourself. The next thing is, what do you converse about? When you go out to lunch, what's the conversations that you try to change the topic to? What do you want to talk about most? If you go out to lunch with your friend, your girlfriend, or your mates, think about what they would say. If you ask them a question, what does he always talk about? What does she always talk about? They will have three things. What would those three things be? What do you like to change the direction of the conversation to because you're more interested in? And if you start the conversation, how do you start conversations? What are the three things? Once you've done that, the next question is, what do you react to? Okay, so what are you withdrawn from that people talk about, and what are you attracted to that they talk about? So if someone's talking about something, what will put you off? Write down three things that you don't like talking about or you don't like discussing, and write down three things that if they start talking about that, you actually attracted to it. You start coming alive on it. And you'll probably find it's the same things that you talk about in your conversations, but it's slightly different. So what do you react to? What gets you alive? What makes you start coming to life and gets that energy release? And lastly, if you was to write down the top 5 goals, okay, what would they be? And the easiest way to do this is, if you was going to die next week, what are 5 things that you'd want to get done? What are 5 things? And another way to do it, and I know these are both kind of morbid ways of doing it, but this really does, as I said before, it forces it up. It forces it up. So another way to look at it is you kind of write your obituary and you say, well, so-and-so, Jason Greystone was a lovely guy. He achieved this, and this. And that's exactly what he wanted in his life. And if you kind of start writing an obituary, as morbid as it might be, you imagine people reading this at your funeral and what you've actually accomplished, what you want to do in the world, how you want to leave people feeling, what you want to have done for people. And that can really help with this process. In fact, Colonel Sanders, who started KFC, he was near suicide when he was about, I think he was near suicide when he was 65. And he got this retirement check from his boss, from the government, and he was near suicide, and he actually did this process. He started writing out a letter, to a suicide note, basically, and during the process of writing the suicide note, he realised that there was still loads that he hadn't done, and there was time to do it, and he actually could do it. So that's what made him start. He invested his retirement check into opening a little kind of mobile fast food chicken place, and that was it. Now, once you've done this exercise, what you'll have is 3 kind of flecks of gold. Okay, there'll be 3 things that stand out, and they will all be linked. What you'll find is they're all linked in terms of the 7 different areas of life. So they will all be linked to money, they'll all be linked to business, they'll all be linked to family, they'll all be linked to social, they'll all be linked to learning, and they'll all be linked to spirituality or social. There'll be one of those things, and all 3 of those will be kind of linked into 1, 2, or 3 of those different areas. Now, you might find that wealth building isn't there. It might not be there, and this is it, right? Because a lot of the people that are coming in, listening to this podcast, or applying for the Tears of Freedom program, it's because they know that it's important and they need to get it done and they want a solution, but it's not been high on their values, otherwise they would have done it. Okay, so now they need a bit of help, so they want to force it up a little bit. So the process that I'm going to share with you is a way of really getting that notched up on your value list, so it will give you a kick up the butt. And if you've got a partner, I highly recommend you do this together as well. So how it works is, and you can do this in all the different areas, we're just going to do it for wealth building because that's the purpose of this podcast, but how it works is you take your top 3 things. Okay, let's just say that you spend most of your time in family. Okay, so you've realised that family, and let's say health and the gym. Okay, let's say those 2 things cropped up and they're the most highest on your values, and you really value them, and you always make time for them, and you always talk about them, and you always find yourself thinking about them, and you fill your space and time with all of that stuff, and you want wealth building to be up there as well. What you need to do is you need to take out a piece of paper or an Excel sheet and start with the first thing on your list. Let's just say it's health or family, whatever you want to pick, and you want to write down 100 benefits, okay, that saving and growing wealth and building wealth will complement and contribute towards your highest value. So 100 benefits. You want to take out a piece of paper and say, benefit 1. Okay, how will growing my wealth, saving and investing and growing my wealth benefit my family? Number 1. Write down a benefit number 2, then benefit 3, benefit 4, benefit 5, and don't stop until you've got 100 benefits. Now you're going to say that's ridiculous, you can't have 100 benefits. They are there, trust me. When I did this process, I wrote down 200 benefits. So you can find 100. And don't stop until you've got 100. And what that will do is it will raise up wealth building on your value list, because you can see how it can actually enhance your highest value, okay, which you don't need any motivation for, which you're naturally drawn to and you're naturally working on. So if something can complement that and make it better, you're going to see that, and it's going to make you shift wealth building on your values. And just like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like motivation, it's nothing to do with motivation. And the same with wealth building. It's not a lack of money. Money's abundant. I'm sure many of you have earned lots of money in the past, and you just feel like you haven't quite got as much to show for it as you've earned. There's some people listening to this that have earned millions over the course of the last 10, 15 years and have still in the same situation. Still, they feel like they should have much more of their bang for their buck. They should have much more of money, and they haven't. But there's not a lack of money. That's abundant. It's simply a lack of value of building it and utilizing it and managing it. And that is it. So I really, really hope you do take the time to go through this process. And I said at the beginning, 17 people out of 5,000 are going to do the actions. I want you to be one of those. Please take the actions, do the actions, and you're going to get life-changing results. So that's it for this week, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I really look forward to hearing from you and how you've kind of shifted that up a gear, how you've figured out what your values actually are. Take some time over the weekend to do it, and send me a message, send me an email. And if you haven't already left a review on this, I'd really appreciate getting a review on the podcast. It really does inspire me and make me want to do more and more of this stuff. So I appreciate you for doing that, and until next week, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongreystone.com.